a session on cyber insurance considerations for 2024. We're going to dig into cybersecurity insurance, some of the key things in roughly 20, 25 minutes, but we're going to start off by talking a little bit about bad actors, how they get in, what they do, why they do it, and kind of what we can do to protect ourselves so we never have to use our cybersecurity insurance that we decide to pay for. Okay, let's just jump right in. I'm Jim Peterson, Principal Solution Advisor at ConnectWise. If you haven't heard of ConnectWise before, it's not surprising. We are a software manufacturer and service manufacturer specifically for the IT service provider industry. So we provide solutions to businesses that provide solutions to small businesses. So our protection mechanisms include a lot of the managed detection and response, BCDR solutions, Security Operations Center, NOC Operations Center. But at the end of the day, the highlight here is NovaPro being a great partner and providing all these services to their community. So just keep going. Now, jumping into cybersecurity itself, right? Initially, cybersecurity was defined as the protection of systems from digital attack. And we could also throw data around that in that world too. But over the last 3 to 5 years, that has grown in scope. And we know today that cybersecurity involves our business reputation, involves our revenue, involves our team, and our client information. And so when we look at how we create a holistic cybersecurity solution, it's going to include things like cyber tools, which is the most common category that we think about when we talk about cybersecurity. But we also have to have the process and people in place to make sure that we're not letting those tools degrade over time, or that those tools are becoming obsolete or in the wrong location. In addition, we also want to make sure we're always in control of our restoration. So a BCDR solution is critical, and we really need to consider network security and risk assessments to understand what challenges we have so that we can deploy the right cybersecurity solution. Now, when we look at a couple of terms, attack, incident, and breach, we use these a lot in the cyber world or in the protection world. Now, attack, again, there's millions going on all the time. We're all being attacked right now as we're sitting here. And the majority of attacks are defended by the solutions deployed. But if an attack were to bypass or get through one of our layers of defense, it would be called an incident. It means it's bypassed a layer of technology. So I get an email, it's got a bad link in it, I click it, I technically created an incident, right? We're hoping that one of our other layers of defense will step up and protect our business. But at the end of the day, that's the difference, right? Now, breach means the incident or the attack has become an incident and it has gotten to the data. It has bypassed enough of our defense mechanisms to get to a point where it can read, delete, modify, interact, take any data that's on the system. So that B word, that breach word, is very dangerous and something we want to avoid. We never want to use that term until we've been told we are supposed to use that term by an organization that's been built to do that. So attack, incident, and breach. Now, when we think of who's attacking us, who's creating those incidents, and who's trying to breach us, these are the bad actors. They typically fall into one of three categories. The first is solo hackers, and these were a little more prevalent, 5 or 10 years ago. They're still prevalent today, but I'll say they're the bigger section of attacks, where these single attackers or small groups of attackers, hacktivists, you can call them a lot of different things. And they're still effective today. What they don't typically do well is scale their attacks. So they'll continue to attack at a certain level, but they can never really breach or get over that large scale size of an attack. Now, nation states are a little bit different. Nation states typically attack other nation states or large organizations that might have intellectual property or some sort of trade secret that they want. Our real threat in the small to mid-sized business community is organized crime. Now, these are large-scale entities that have HR departments, recruiting firms, bonus structures. And their real challenge here is if an organized crime entity finds a vulnerability that is worth exploiting, they can scale it very quickly. They can assign multiple hackers or engineers to that attack and large scale the attack so that they can get as many people to be impacted by it as possible. So organized crime is where it's at today. It's a real challenge and is our biggest challenge in cybersecurity. Now, when we think of these entities, we'll touch on some big dollars in a minute, but how they get paid. They only get paid in one of three ways. They either ransom you, meaning you have to pay to restore access to your system. They extort you, meaning that you have to pay so they don't release your information, or they bypass you altogether and just sell your data. Depending on the type of data you have, type of organization you have, they're going to pick the one that has the most buyout or has the most payout. They want to find the path of least resistance for the most money. So one of these are all fall into place. Oftentimes or sometimes multiple can be applied, but the majority of the organized crime bad actors will typically select one, get paid, and then stop the attack, but that's not always the case. Now, if we know who they are, we know they're organized crime, how do they get in, right? You won't be surprised that roughly 80% of the time they get in because of something we have done. It's a people issue. And those issues typically fall in one of two categories, credentials or phishing attacks. Now, if you look at the numbers here, we're up in the mid 60% of all access that is gained is done through credentials and phishing. Now, when we say credentials, that means they've gotten your username and password and we're able to bypass your login to get to the data. Now, the biggest offense we can do for credentials is multi-factor authentication. It doesn't drop us down to 0% attack, but it does lower it significantly because you have to have that secondary authentication to be able to move forward in your data access process. So we think of things like it could be as simple as password reuse. So an example would be I use the same password for my Netflix account as I do my Facebook account as I do my company account. If I use that same password and any of those are breached, at the end of the day, all of them are breached. So I now have to access into every one of your systems. Even if you use a different password or a different username, if one is your personal email and one's your business email, it's not that hard for AI to figure that out and get in and do something. So credentials are key. MFA is the big defense against that. Phishing, on the other hand, is typically defended from email filterings, but as we know, a lot of times it'll still bypass that. The bad actors are very crafty and they'll find ways to bypass our email systems to get it in your inbox. And at the end of the day, we have to rely then on security awareness training, our skepticism, our scrutiny of any email that comes in to make sure that we don't click the link and we don't fall for those types of attacks. Now, the last big category in gaining access that isn't people-driven are exploits. And these are going to be vulnerabilities in hardware and software that just happen over time. All systems decay, all systems, when they have an update, can have a potential issue for a challenge. We have roughly 7,000 known vulnerabilities that are released every quarter. That's growing every quarter as hardware and software manufacturers are increasing. And the way we protect against this is system patching and assessments. Now, system patching is pretty default when it comes to like end user devices like laptops, desktops, and most mobile devices. But we also got to include network security devices, firewalls, servers, switches, all those things in the back end that need these patching as well. Now, assessments come into play because they help us find things that we forgot about. At the end of the day, a lot of security professionals or IT professionals were turned over, changed jobs in 2022, roughly 19%. So a lot of industry knowledge or business knowledge left organizations. So continually doing assessments in our environment to understand what's out there. Is it deployed properly? Is it patched properly? It's just a key asset to make sure that we're doing everything we can to avoid challenges in our future. Now, from there, we know who they are, right? Organized crime. They get in because most of the time we've done something to allow them in. Once they get in, what do, right? First things first, they investigate. They want to understand your environment, what type of data you have, what type of business you are, how susceptible you are to ransom, how susceptible you are to extortion. The goal in all of this step is to maximize the payout. How do they get the most money from you, either from ransom or extortion, or data sale if they find out that you're not a good ransom or extortion target? But they won't know that without investigation. So they're going to take their time and understand your environment. From there, they're going to go to data exfiltration. They're going to take it out of the system. The goal with this then is to say, well, if I interrupt the attack midstream, if I stop it after exfiltration because I figured it out, I had the right solution in place to notify that there's an issue, I still have the data to do extortion or data sale. So I have a fallback system that I can use to at least make something on these efforts. From there, they continue to get off scot-free and they don't have any issues, they'll go to BCDR manipulation. And we'll touch on this a few times through the presentation. If a bad actor can stop your ability to restore data, they are guaranteed typically a payment of some sort because most businesses just can't afford to start over. So the BCDR manipulation is a key attack point for bad actors. Again, one of the things that we'll say all the time is we want to be in control of our restoration at all times. And so when the bad actor disables that or takes that ability away, we really put them in command of the situation. From there, production manipulation, this is when we see it. It's either a missing file, a corrupt file, some sort of other extension on a file that tells us something went wrong and the ransom request would come in. Now, the challenging part of this is it takes around 200 days on average to go through this process. Sometimes this timeline shrinks, sometimes it expands, but we know that roughly 3 months of time has went by from access to ransom requests. So just one thing to think about when you're thinking of your own restoration, what timelines you need to be able to restore data from. It's a really critical point to know they could be in an environment for 3 to 6 to 12 months. Now, why they do it? Again, if their only source of revenue is ransom, extortion, and data sale, it won't be surprising that it's financially driven. This number is from the FBI from the United States, 10.3 billion paid out in 2022. Again, this is just ransom and extortion. This is a small, very small number compared to the total cost of cybercrime because the majority of attacks don't get reported to the FBI or to anybody. A lot of times small businesses just pay their ransom, pay their extortion, and try to sweep it under the rug so that nobody knows they were attacked, specifically their competition, maybe their suppliers or even their employees. And this also doesn't include any sort of restoration, any sort of lost revenue, any financial loss from any legal fees that came out of this. So this is just a piece of the puzzle, and it's a very large number when we think about it holistically. Now, artificial intelligence. We love to touch on artificial intelligence whenever we're talking about cybersecurity because it's made a significant impact. There's a lot of different solutions up there. And I just noticed that still says GBARD and now it's Gemini, so I got to get a better logo out there. But at the end of the day, AI has been created to reduce response time and increase capacity, kind of in general, if we look at the two kind of prongs of the fork. And it does that for good in many businesses, but it also can do that for bad when we think of bad actors. Because AI can turn anyone into a sophisticated hacker. I can leverage AI to create a script to take control of your machine and email that out to a couple 100,000 people pretty easily. Now, the defenses are coming into play in AI to try and prevent this, but it's just too many opportunities to create scripting in these solutions that's very effective. So one thing that we'll always recommend is creating an AI policy for your business just to show what you're going to allow. Because most of the time, employees are going to leverage AI to, again, improve their response time or improve their capacity. So if we have a solution in place saying we can only leverage this for specific activities and we can never put business or critical or any sensitive information into a public AI system, that's a no-no because once it's out there for everyone. And just an example of what AI can do, if we look at a phishing email from a few years ago, this is, again, not a great example because most of us would not click on this today. We have enough security awareness training to look at this email and say, yes, I spot that email address is incorrect. I know they wouldn't refer to me as your customer. The links don't match, just all these general things. But if we look at what AI can do in creating a phishing email, it's very sophisticated. So this is an AI generated phishing mail. It is directed to Curtis in this example. And again, it's very easy for AI to do this to large sums of people, create individual messages, obviously pulling a real signature. It's only pixelized on the bottom because we've blown it up for this screen. But at the end of the day, this is a fantastic email and would trick a lot of people as it goes out into the wild. So if we have all these challenges, we have bad actors, we have AI, they're getting in because we make mistakes. How do we defend against it? And this is where we would say defense in depth, a layered defense, a stack. You can call it many different things, but at the end of the day, our goal is to say, hey, if one of these technologies that are meant to stop an attack are bypassed, we want something else to pick it up so that we don't get to the breach state, so that it doesn't get to the data. In my example, if I click the link, My security awareness training was bypassed, but my goal is that my DNS and web filtering would step in and deny that result from going out to the internet, would stop the attack, or my MDR would stop the attack, or my access management would stop the attack. And at the end of the day, we look at the last line of defense being business continuity and disaster recovery. If it gets to the data, again, we want to be in control. We want to be able to restore our environment at any time based on our needs. Excuse me. So the challenge with this is that we talked about the step-by-step actions the bad actors take. We know that that's an attack point. And so we've had to come up with a way of creating a solution to a problem. And that solution to BCDR being manipulated is cybersecurity insurance. How do we fund a restoration if we can't control the restoration? And it's a really challenging thing. So at the end of the day, we're going to jump into talking about things in a cybersecurity insurance program that you can consider, or you should consider, but at the end of the day, how do we not use it? How do we avoid using our cybersecurity insurance premium policy? Because we don't ever want to have to do that. Okay, so why purchase cybersecurity insurance, right? One of the big reasons is it's not always us. So if I have a small business and I have employees and I've put all my solutions in place, I've done a good job training my team. They're very skeptical. They don't click links. They know to use unique passwords. We've done MFA. We've done everything right. We can still be at risk from cybercrime. And again, this could happen from vendors, from suppliers, anybody that's connecting in to do something as simple as a building maintenance system that's on our internal network that we didn't catch. It becomes a breach point, and all of a sudden our data is at risk. So we're not always 100% in control of everything we think we are. And cyber insurance can help us from those outside threats. In addition, the cost of a ransom is going up. If we just look at these quick data, and again, these are from the National Cyber Threat Assessment from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. The ransom requests have doubled in a couple of years. And again, this is 2022 stats. We know 2023 stats have almost doubled again. The rates are going up significantly for a ransom payout. So what back in 2018 might have been $40,000 or $50,000 is now $500,000 or $600,000. And most businesses just don't have the ability to cover that type of expense. So they have to use a cybersecurity insurance premium. And last is, it's not just ransom and extortion. If we think of cybersecurity, that's the first thing that typically comes to mind. I need to pay the bill so I can restore access or so I can protect information from leaving. But we have a lot of other situations where cybersecurity insurance can be leveraged. Breach recovery, meaning they got in somehow. I need to go patch the hole. I need to pay my team, my security team, my MSP, my IT service provider to fix the problem. I may have some legal liability out there from a ransom or extortion, or even the breach of data, even if it never ransomed or extorted. I may have some privacy liability out there that I have to control. Business interruption insurance, piece of cybersecurity. If our revenue is disrupted, how do we cover that? Forensic investigation, public relations, cybersecurity audits, all these things can be added to a cybersecurity policy to make sure it covers more than just that ransom or extortion. It's a really important piece of this. Because cybersecurity insurance providers have gotten very intelligent in our space. If we look back 5 or 6 years ago, they really didn't understand what good security was. They were asking questions, they were trying to understand, but they didn't understand our world. They understood fire and auto and all those life insurance challenges, but cybersecurity wasn't in their purview. Now, they've gotten really great at this though. So now they know the right questions to ask to make sure that they don't have to pay out. So if they just ask, do you leverage MFA? You can say yes if you use it in one section. Now they're going to ask you specifics so they understand what their true risks are. And this has created a green line of increase in cyber adoption. So we've had to add more technology to align with the true risks in the world today and to help us actually get cybersecurity insurance policies. We look at the rate of increase through 2021, it was significant. Again, this was year-over-year increase rates for cybersecurity insurance. 25% increase just from 2020 to 2021. This is because they didn't understand the environment and they were paying out significant sums because they weren't asking the right questions. Well, they started asking the right questions and they've been able to reduce the increase rate. Again, still an increase at 12% in 2022, but with businesses adopting more of the good technology, it's really helped reduce that increase in premiums. Now, a couple things to consider when you're jumping into your first or your next cybersecurity insurance policy. First thing is a rider versus a full policy. And we won't go too in depth on this because we're going to recommend a full policy just because it has the additional options for a lot of coverage that your specific business may need. And that's the second point. Understanding, do you need just breach? Do you need ransomware? Do you need extortion? Do you need business interruption, regulatory fines and penalties, cryptojacking? All these opportunities to cover you if there were to be cybercrime in your chain. So how do I make sure that my business can still operate? How do I make sure I can pay my employees from a cyber attack if a cyber attack were to happen? So understanding there's more coverage areas available to you in a full policy, and understanding specifically what you need will come down to I think the fourth bullet point, but rates and reputations. This is where it gets interesting. There's a lot of cybersecurity insurance providers out there that do that as a piece of their business, and that's great. But we want to really understand the businesses that are getting involved with this, what's their rates, what's their reputation. So we're going to typically recommend that you look for 3 or 4 different policies before selecting one so you can find the right one that fits your business from a pricing perspective and a coverage perspective. And this is typically going to come from professional review. So having a cybersecurity specific broker come in to review your needs, your specific needs for your business, to understand the limitations, the coverage expansion areas, how much cybersecurity insurance you need in all of those areas is really important to making sure we're matching it up. One of the challenges we can have is that we have a $600,000 ransom request, but we have $200,000 in ransom insurance. We're just not lining up because our data was more sensitive and we're further along in the path of this process. So we need to make sure that everything matches up for what our business needs. And last is there's an offsetting opportunity for deploying good technology. Now, this is becoming an offsetting requirement versus an opportunity as the companies are becoming more educated in what provides good security. But at the end of the day, by deploying more security that's going to protect your environment, you can significantly lower the cost of cybersecurity insurance for your organization. Now, touching on the avoiding the cybersecurity ransom, one of the most important ways we talked about was BCDR. How do we recover from disaster and continue to operate our business? And one way we're going to look at is the 3-2-1 process, right? 3 copies of your data on 2 different medias, 1 being offsite. We add the plus to that because we need to have proper configuration of that environment to make sure it's reliable. We saw in the earlier slides that the bad actors want to attack your BCDR solution so that you're not in charge of recovery. By properly configuring, we can always count on that solution so that we're always in control. What this looks like is production, local, and offsite backup. Now, the geographic distance is easy today. It was hard 10 years ago, but it's super easy today. But with data going to the cloud and with our users being very remote, one of the challenges that we come into, or I may be able to control one piece of data into 3-2-1, but other data that's in our SaaS field, that is in a BYOD, bring your own device, that an employee may own, may have data out there. How do we control that? Well, we need to apply the same strategy with all critical business data, no matter where it's located. And we want to make sure we can control that. So we need to oftentimes back up our SaaS, oftentimes make sure that employees are using specific data storage locations on their mobile devices so that it can be replicated and brought back to the environment so that we can have a local backup and an offsite backup. Now, as an example of a breach were to occur, what do we do if we were to have this happen? There's a lot of protection things we can do to protect our backup systems so that they're not accessible. But at the end of the day, we need to have something called immutable storage. And all this really means, it's also called air gap storage. All this really means is that the data cannot be destroyed, right? It cannot be deleted, cannot be modified. Even if they were able to get in and make it look like they deleted the data, it's can be fully recovered as is instantly by the system. It's just a way of protecting backup data. I want to make sure we're always using this again, so we're always in control of our restoration. Now, while this performance challenge is sitting with the offsite backup, which is a real challenge if we're using slower or less expensive storage, thousands of miles away, we always want to make sure that the performance of our system matches our business needs. One thing that we've consistently seen in small businesses is they'll develop a 3-2-1 solution and they'll say that their maximum tolerable downtime is 24 hours, but they'll find out their restoration time is 72 hours. They can't restore in the time frame that the business needs because of many performance considerations. So making sure that you understand these solutions, the steps, the maximum tolerable downtime, your recovery point objective, your data retention timelines, all of these things so that you can always be in control of recovery and you can recover in the time the business needs. Now, kind of wrapping this up into a couple of things to take away to get a good cybersecurity insurance premium. We would say there's 6 core cybersecurity requirements for the foundation. And these are going to align really well with getting the best premium, but they're also going to help you with best practices in security and alignment with compliance. And we'll look at things like an incident response plan, knowing what to do if an issue were to recur. And this could be a breach from the outside. It could be an internal threat actor. Again, it could be an accidental internal threat that affects data. It could be a natural disaster. It could be a large system failure. How do we respond to an incident? How do we communicate? How do we work through the process? How do we enact the business recovery, the business continuity, the disaster recovery plan? How do we do those things? By having it written down, it solves a lot of our challenges of what to do next. And then we get to the technology. And on the front end, we're going to say, well, there's antivirus and then there's endpoint detection and response. We want to make sure we're using endpoint detection and response because it doesn't just stop known viruses, it also stops unknown challenges or activities. Now, the managed side of that, the MDR, just puts a team behind that, a security operations center who's going to be monitoring all those alerts and maintaining the system. So MDR is at the top, EDR is a good solution, AV we need to retire. We also need to look at things like multi-factor authentication everywhere. It's the #1 way to reduce that credential theft. There's still opportunities to break MFA, but it's much harder. We look at security awareness training to keep people very skeptical. We look at a SIM and SOC, or Security Information Event Manager, and a Security Operations Center to stop and see things in the middle of the attack. So this is going to pull data from all of our pieces of equipment, correlate it, and try to find challenges. And then last is that BCDR solution, business continuity, disaster recovery. How do we maintain and stay in control of our restoration at all times? Now, looking to wrap this up, specifically around cybersecurity, everyone's a target. A lot of times small businesses don't think they're a target and they become more of a target because they don't put the solutions in place to protect themselves. And then they become more of a target because they don't have the security in place to stop the attacks. So understand that the majority of attacks are just attacking email addresses and IP addresses. That's all they care about. They're just scanning to find someone who clicks, scanning to find a vulnerability out there. And once they find it, they start the attack. So we're still a target even if we don't think we are because our business is small. We become a good defender of our business by building a layered defense, having multiple technologies in place that can pick up where something left off or pick up one from a hole that was punched in. How do we design that layer? We do assessments. We have to know our risks. We have to understand your specific business, what your data risks are, what your business risks are, what your employee risks are, so that we can build the right defense to make sure that you're properly protected. This is where a company like NovaPro comes in and can do a risk, a network, a security assessment and tell you, hey, here are your risks areas. Here's the right solution to deploy to protect your business optimally so that you can get the best insurance premiums, so you can follow good practices, and so you can be in line with compliance. And that's it. So I see we have Alexandra on the call. If you have questions, we'd love to hear it. You can put it in the chat and just refer to Jim or ConnectWise and I can answer it. Maybe somebody can take you off mute in a few minutes if you have a question.